Hello, everyone. I'm Kim Donahue with Newgrange Consulting, and this is the third in our series of videos on understanding nonprofit boards. First, it's very important that we say thank you. Thank you to the Meridian Foundation and the Friends of the Library, because they have provided the support that allows the library to provide all of these trainings to you free of charge. So be sure to check out the library website so that you can find out what other workshop videos may be available to you. In part one, we talked about the role of the nonprofit board. In part two, we talked about recruiting, engaging, and retaining board members. In this one, we're going to talk about just general best practices for board effectiveness. Everyone wants to have a strong board that's providing the leadership that the nonprofit needs. Let's talk about what the best boards do. All board members deserve meaningful work. By meaningful work, they deserve board meetings where they can have discussions, where they make decisions, where they learn more about the nonprofit, and where they have an opportunity to ask lots of questions. Board members should receive a yearly schedule of meetings. That is an absolute best practice. Board members should know when the meetings are scheduled so that they can put those meetings on their calendars and so that they can be great board members and attend almost all of the meetings. Board members also deserve complete information before the meeting, which means they deserve whatever is going to be discussed in the meeting. If there's background information on it, they should receive that beforehand. In addition, when they join the board, they should receive a complete orientation. Part two, we talked about all the things that are involved in orientation. They should get lots of information about the nonprofit, which might mean the bylaws, it might mean previous minutes of meetings, but it's an opportunity to really get to know what happens at the board meetings before they attend. And finally, we want to respect the time, the expertise of our board members, and we want to encourage them to ask questions. That's really a summary of what is best practice on great nonprofit boards. Here are the characteristics of the most effective board members. Obviously, they're attending all the meetings. They're prepared for the meetings. They express their opinions respectfully, and they don't hesitate to express their opinions. They ask questions. They serve as ambassadors to the larger community. They introduce everyone they know to this nonprofit. They talk about the nonprofit. They invite them to events. They share information with other neighborhood organizations about this nonprofit. They do everything they can to promote the nonprofit. They also make a personal gift. When we talk about board members, we also talk about time, talent, and treasure. Those are the three things we always talk about. Board members give their time, not only in meetings, but board members often volunteer and provide other volunteer support to the nonprofit. Their talent, it's really important that board members share their professional talent. When board members are invited to serve, one of the qualifications is that they had some really wonderful business credentials that would allow them to be a valuable member of the board. And treasure, according to their means, what they can afford, they give to the organization, and they also encourage others to give to the organization. The most effective board members respect the decisions of the board. I think everyone has attended meetings where after the meeting, there are other meetings that are taking place in the parking lot. There are little groups of people gathered around talking about whatever happened in the board meeting. Now, that will always happen, but if it happens a lot, and if there are long discussions in the parking lot, then that could mean that there are discussions taking place outside of the board meeting that should be taking place inside the board meeting. And when a decision is made by the board, even if I didn't vote for it, but the majority of the board decided that this was the right course of action, it is my obligation as a board member to respect the decision of the board, which means I don't express opposition outside of the board meeting, and I don't undermine the decision that the board has made. Bringing their professional skills to the board. This is a really important one. Please, if you are a board member, do not leave your professional self outside the board meeting. I've seen it happen too many times where someone thinks it's just a nonprofit. Again, I can tell you a story that I think points this out really emphatically. There was a small nonprofit in town, and they had the opportunity to buy the building they were in. And in fact, a local foundation offered to give them a grant for the purchase price of the building. They were thrilled. The board president was in commercial real estate. He'd been in commercial real estate for 20 years. He had a lot of expertise, a lot of professional skills here. After they purchased the board, they approved purchasing the building. When they purchased the building, they found out there were all kinds of things wrong with it. There were lots of repairs that they had to do that they really weren't prepared for. When I was talking to the board chair, he said, well, if it had been me, I would not have bought this building, but it wasn't my money. Think about that. Here's a man with commercial real estate expertise who could probably see many of the flaws in the building, but he said, it's not my money, so I just voted to buy the building. It was a disservice on his part. He did not bring his professional self into that board meeting. He should have brought those things up with the other board members. They should have had an opportunity to really think more carefully about this. So please always bring your professional skills to the board meeting. And when you're recruiting board members, look for people who have the professional skills you need. And when you recruit them, tell them that you hope they will share their professional skills with you. One of the other things that often happens is that accountants and attorneys are sometimes invited to serve on a board with the understanding on the part of the board that they're going to provide professional services at no cost. If that's not been made clear, if that has not been talked about, it's not fair to that person. I know people who are in specific professional fields who, when they serve on a nonprofit, really don't want to do that. They do it all day. They certainly will be great for asking questions and helping out, but they don't want to take over. Someone who's invited to serve on a board as the accountant doesn't want to start membership on the board as the board treasurer. You need to give them some time to get to know the nonprofit. So respect the skills and talents of your board members and make it very clear to them if you're hoping that they will provide more. Then respecting the authority of the chief executive in the day-to-day operation. I think it's essential that the chief executive of the nonprofit runs the nonprofit day-to-day. That means supervising staff, evaluating staff, hiring, firing staff. That's their responsibility. It's not the responsibility of the board. The board's responsibility is to hire and evaluate the chief executive of the organization. Let's talk about board presidents for a minute. I've been saying there are a lot of things that are other duties as assigned for a board president, and we certainly know that to be true. The board president, first of all, should establish a good relationship with the chief executive, and that's a two-way street. The chief executive should work to establish a great relationship with the board president. Establish a relationship that allows you to get to know each other personally as well as professionally, and then have regular meetings. Generally, most nonprofit board presidents meet with the chief executive once a month, and it gives them an opportunity to discuss whatever may be coming up, to develop the agenda for the next meeting, to decide what issues may be coming up in the future and when they need to schedule a retreat, and how are we doing on the strategic plan, and what goal from the strategic plan should we include on the board agenda this time. The board president also makes sure that the CEO is evaluated yearly, and there should not be a surprise when the evaluation comes. The CEO should be given feedback throughout the year so that when evaluation time comes, it isn't a surprise. And it also is good to mention that the board president is not the only one responsible for the CEO's evaluation. It is important that the entire board has input into the evaluation of the CEO. Again, the most effective board presidents also meet with every board member individually. It's great to not only meet with new board members to get to know them, but to meet with all board members once a year. Maybe Cindy, the board member, doesn't want to serve on the same committee again this year. Maybe she'd like to move on to another committee. Committee assignments shouldn't be life sentences. So meet with every board member to find out what they want from their board service, what is important to them on the board, what things they might want to volunteer for, to learn more about them. And this again, those other duties as assigned. The board president should call board members who haven't attended a meeting to hold them accountable for their attendance. You've missed 2 meetings. Is there something going on that we should know about? And I think it's also important if the board president has had an opportunity to meet with every board member individually, can find out if there are some things going on in their lives, because you get to know them personally as well. Are there some things going on that might interfere with board attendance? Is this board member taking on a new job, a new assignment? Is he moving to another company, or is he moving into a new position? Has someone just become a new mom or a new dad? There may be things that can interfere with their board membership. If the board president knows that, he or she can anticipate that. Talking to board members who haven't attended a meeting to hold them accountable. It's also important for all board members to know that if the obligation has become too much for them, it's okay to resign. I'll say that again. Give board members permission, if the obligation has become too much for them, to resign. You don't want board members generally, even if things have changed for them and they just don't have the time, they feel terribly guilty about saying, I don't want to serve on the board anymore. But they don't realize that it's a disservice to the organization if they really can't attend board meetings. So making it part of the discussion with them, that if something ever happens and you don't think you can serve, let me know, because it's okay. And then finally, making board service fun and rewarding for all the members. Provide some social outlet for board members to get to know each other. It doesn't have to be very, very serious all the time. Some things can be fun. Board presidents have an obligation to make sure that meetings start and end on time. They have to use strong meeting management skills, because you sometimes have to rein in the talkers on the board. There are some people who love to talk. You also have to encourage other people who are not speaking up to speak up, so that 1 or 2 of the same people aren't the only people who speak at every board meeting. You have to go around the table and ask people if they have some opinions. Ask them what they think of this particular thing. And then the board chair also holds committee chairs and other officers accountable for the work they've been assigned. Checking in with committee chairs. How are you doing? You've got 3 assignments from the last 2 meetings. How are you doing on those? Do you think you can report out on those at the next meeting? So managing the board is also an important function of the board chair. The most effective boards support the chief executive. And there are so many ways to do that. Giving the chief executive some pats on the back when he or she deserves it. Encouraging them when they're maybe at a low point. Maybe they didn't get a grant they were really hoping to get, and they're feeling a little down about that. Supporting them. Ask great questions. And also respect differences of opinion. Hopefully, not everyone on the board is going to agree on everything. It's good to have some difference of opinion. It's good to have some discussions. I also think making strategic decisions to guide the organization, that's what the most effective boards do. And I also think, going back for a minute to the board president should have the kind of relationship with the executive director that if there's bad news, it's okay for the executive director to talk with the board chair about it. You know, there's a saying, bad news early is good news. If an executive director, CEO, feels comfortable with the board chair to say, there's something coming down the pike that I'm really worried about, and discuss it with them, it allows the board president and the board in general to be proactive. And that's part of the board's role in supporting the chief executive. Things aren't always going to go well. There are going to be challenges along the way. That's true for any business, that there are going to be challenges along the way. So supporting that chief executive is really important. And sometimes that involves asking questions. And the board has to make those strategic decisions to guide the organization to move it forward. The most effective boards also discuss diversity. They seek members who are going to add the diversity that they really need. And that's why I think it's great to have a discussion at a board meeting about diversity and about what you need on the board that you don't have right now. Is the community really represented on this board? Do we have a wide range of socioeconomic representation on this board? Do we have people who think differently on the board? That's important, and encouraging every board member to participate. I think board members who make other board members feel welcome have a stronger board. One board that I work with, they wanted me to do a board assessment that I would bring to their board retreat. It was a very large board. I think there were almost 30 people on this board. And when I read the results of their board assessment, because I sent them an assessment to fill out about what they thought about the board, it was really interesting, because board members who described themselves as veteran board members who'd been on the board for a while said they were really disappointed in the newer, younger members of the board who just didn't seem to have opinions on anything, just didn't speak up, didn't do anything. Then I looked at the comments from the newer, younger board members who said, the meetings are dominated by people who have been on the board for a long time. I don't feel comfortable speaking up. I don't think my opinions are welcome. And I won't speak up. And it seems that they volunteer for everything right away, and there's no opportunity for me to volunteer. So it was obvious there was a real disconnect in terms of what they thought. The day I came to their board retreat, they were at a very long table. And it was pretty apparent that the board members who had been on the board for a long time were sitting on one side of the table, and the board members who were newer were sitting on the other side of the table. So I gave them the results of the board assessment, but I said, there are some specific comments I want to call out. And I called out some of those comments that were made. There was shock on both sides of the table. The veteran board members, a couple of them said, well, we didn't think you wanted to volunteer. We didn't think you had anything to say. And the newer board members said, yeah, we do, but we never had an opportunity to speak up. It seems like the discussion gets beyond us before we have a chance to even think about it and express an opinion. So I divided them up into some smaller groups, mixed them up, and I had some questions for them and had them talk about how they could work together. And the rest of the day went really well. Was very friendly. They asked a lot of questions. The board members who were veterans were very inclusive with the newer board members. The newer board members started to speak up. And in following up with that board a few months later, they'd really changed the culture of the board because they were encouraging everyone to participate. That's what an effective board does. Most effective boards recruit new members from outside their circle of friends. Again, if you don't want to be a well-kept secret, get beyond your immediate circle of family and friends. Start looking at other neighborhood organizations. Start looking outside your circle. Start looking at other community organizations. Ask your executive director what connections she has that may be beyond your immediate circle. And then making expectations clear. Making sure that everyone knows what is expected of them. You're expected, yes, to attend board meetings every month, but there are these other requirements we have. You have to go to events. You have to serve on a committee. You have to volunteer 3 hours a month. If there are other expectations, to make those very clear to them. And then having a really thorough orientation so that new board members, when they come into that first board meeting and sit down, feel that they know a lot about the organization. They know financially how the organization is doing. They've read minutes of previous meetings. They understand what the discussions have been. They've had an opportunity before the meeting started to visit with other board members and to get to know them. They feel part of things. And effective boards develop new leaders. Look around. Who expresses opinions? Who volunteers for assignments? Who has really expressed an interest? Provide opportunities for them to take more leadership. Do you have a couple chairs of committees who have really done a great job with their committees? That's a great place to develop leadership and to encourage those people. And maybe it's up to the board president and the executive director to sit down with those people and say, have you ever thought about being an officer for a nonprofit? We think you're a great board member. You're a great committee chair. We think you'd also be a great officer of the board. So developing that next generation of leaders on your board is important too. I don't think anyone should ever have to attend a boring meeting. So I have often made it my mission to really encourage organizations to do things really right when it comes to meetings. One is to get creative with your agenda. If you've got a really important issue to discuss, turn that agenda upside down. Put the most important thing on the agenda up at the top. There are no agenda police. No one's going to give you a ticket for reversing the order of things on your agenda. You're going to be able to have a much more lively discussion, and you're going to discuss that really important item when everyone is fresh, when everyone is willing to take the time to ask the questions. So don't hesitate. Turn that agenda upside down if you want to. Plan for interaction and action items. So again, no one should come to a board meeting and listen for an hour and a half. Just listen. There should be questions asked. There maybe should be an education piece. There should be a mission moment where a staff person comes and tells a great story and board members have a chance to ask the staff member questions about this. Is this typical? What else can you tell us about what happens? What's the procedure? When someone comes in, what does intake do? Have board members get to know procedures in the organization. So have lots of interaction and action items. Look at the strategic plan. I've talked about that a lot, I know. But look at the strategic plan. Examine one of those goals. See how you're doing. Think about how information is communicated. Is everything sent by email? Do you send some stuff by snail mail? That can be a tough one. But you also, if you're a fledgling nonprofit, you may have members of your board who are not connected to the internet. If you're a neighborhood organization, you may have board members who don't have access to the internet. So you can't always assume that everyone can receive things by email. If people don't have access to the internet, you may have to think about either mailing or hand delivering information for the board meeting to make sure that they get the information in a timely fashion so that they can really contribute to the board meeting. Use ground rules. I've talked about ground rules before. Having a ground rule like everyone participates, start and end on time, soft on people, hard on ideas. Questions are good. Questions are expected. One conversation is another one. If you find that your group tends to be very talkative and there are little side conversations happening during the meeting, you may want to have a ground rule that says no side conversations. And a really important ground rule is electronic devices off or on silent. And if you have people who are especially attached to their electronic devices, and you have, for example, an hour and a half meeting, at 45 minutes, you may want to take a 10-minute break. 10-minute break, you can look at your phones. We're going to start back at this time. Provide an opportunity for them to check their text messages. So having ground rules so that the board chair can just, and post them at the meeting. Post those ground rules at the meeting, and if several people are having a side conversation, say, oh, sorry, remember, we're not supposed to have side conversations. Or if you see somebody's hands are under the table and they're texting, you can say, I think we're supposed to be keeping our devices on silent until it's time for our break. Having those ground rules posted makes it easier for the board chair to hold people account. Using a parking lot, that's a big piece of paper that's posted on the wall. And when someone goes down a rabbit trail, brings up something that isn't part of the discussion, you can ask that person if it's okay. We really need to move along on the agenda. We really need to finish discussing this. That is an interesting point, though, or that's a good idea. Can I put that on the parking lot? They'll say yes. And then you have to be sure to go back to that list at the end of the meeting and decide where it needs to go. Do we have, we're finishing early. Do we have time to take a little time to decide where we want to go with this item? Is it something that should be brought to this committee? Is it something that the staff will report on? Whatever it is, it's great to keep you on track time-wise, but also to be respectful to a board member who may have had a brainstorm and thought of something really great that the board should talk about. It provides a place to record that, and also to then say, this is something we're going to include in the next meeting. And finally, to evaluate your meetings with a plus delta. This is very simple. You give each board member 2 Post-it notes. One you put a plus on, and the other one they put a delta on. On the plus Post-it note, they write down something that the board really does well at its meetings. On the delta side, that Post-it note, they write down something that they think the board could do better, something that the board should add, or something the board shouldn't do anymore. And then on their way out, they just post those notes on the wall. You will be amazed at the excellent feedback you get on your meeting with just 2 simple Post-it notes. And likewise, if you're having a hybrid meeting where some people are virtual and some people are in the room, you can do that with the people who are in the room, but then ask the people who are virtual, as soon as we're right now, you're at your keyboard, write down plus 2 things that we can do better. 2 things that we're doing really well. And on delta, write down 2 things that we can, and send them to me, the board chair. I will be happy to look at those and make some changes based on it. You don't need to do that all the time, even monthly. You need to do it maybe twice a year to give board members a way to give you input on the meeting. You may get some really great ideas on how to make your board meetings even better. And here are those nonprofit resources that can be really helpful to you. The Good to Great in the Social Sectors monograph by Jim Collins is a must read for first-time board members. It's not a bad read for every board member too. It helps you really understand the difference between the for-profit world and the nonprofit world. The Indianapolis Public Library is a marvelous source of free workshops and lots of information about nonprofit management. Boardable.com helps board members organize everything that they need in one particular place, one portal, but they also offer lots of free materials. Ebooks are especially good and can give you lots of information on how to conduct a board education, how to really engage your board, a governance guide, things that can really help you. And then BoardSource is the website for board members and really can provide lots of information to help you grow your board in expertise and skill. And then the final resource here is the fundraising school at the Center of Philanthropy. We are very lucky to have this resource in our community. They do wonderful work and have excellent workshops as well. So it's another good resource for publications and great things to do. I thank you for watching this video. I hope that we have been helpful to you. I hope that you will take advantage of all of the other workshops that the public library is offering. They are a wonderful resource for our community. Once again, thanks very much for attending and happy board meetings.